It's important that your brain is more involved than your heart in decisions that will affect the rest of your life. It felt really good to just have those small, innocuous moments of rebellion. If they can get you into that control mindset while you're in college, they've got you.
Welcome to Unbound,
A podcast for new atheists
and lifetime atheists,
ex-evangelicals.
truth seekers, and free thinkers.
There is life after faith.
And life here is good. It's time for a new perspective.
And a better conversation. I'm Spider.
And I'm Shelle, and it's time to get unbound.
Welcome to another episode of Unbound. I'm Spider.
And I'm Shelle.
And today we are just going to get right into our main topic. No Christians behaving badly this week, folks. We've got some serious shit to deal with. And we are going to be talking about the problem of Bible colleges and why they are a bad idea. Now, I came across some really interesting stuff in my research for this one, not the least of which being some really interesting information about my and Shelle's alma mater, which, since we're going to be talking specifically about a bunch of schools today, I don't feel bad about mentioning their name anymore. Shelle and I are refugees from a little Bible college outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania called Valley Forge Christian College. Today they go by Valley Forge University because they have a couple of paltry master's programs at this point that are equally as useless as any other degree in that place. So I just want to, before I get off on my tirade about some of the stuff that happened, I really think I should turn the mic over to my co-host first, because I feel like I could talk for hours on this, and I want to get her perspective. I want to get the perspective of someone who shows up on that campus, number one, as a woman, and also in the context of why you were there, what led to you going there, what the influences were that put you on that campus in the first place, and go.
Oh, gee, just everything. Well, I had gotten a call, like everybody gets a call. Like if they go to Christian college, they're going to be saying, oh, well, I went down to the altar and I felt that I should go into the ministry. And I did, but I was shy and I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And I liked music. I had always wanted to do music as a career. I didn't even get guidance from my own pastor. And
that's unusual.
Yeah.
Because usually they're the ones that are pushing it the hardest. You know, it's right there in the bylaws of a lot, not just one, but a lot of evangelical organizations. It's right there in the bylaws that one of the things that it is expected of youth pastors is that they push the concept of a life of full-time ministry with young people. Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah, they do. But, you know, I didn't have a lot of direction. I didn't have a lot of direction at home. I didn't have a lot of direction at school. I didn't have a lot of direction anywhere. So I made this decision kind of in a vacuum. Once I said, oh, yes, I'm going to go here, everybody was all in favor of it. But direction was not a thing that I had.
I don't think they push the concept on the girls as much as they do on the boys.
No.
But the problem is the boys need the girls to keep filling the quiver.
Yes.
So it's kind of weird that they would have that kind of emphasis on the male end of the education platform and completely snub the ones that are going to keep their religion alive. It's pretty remarkable to me, but then again, it really isn't all that surprising either, the way that they look at women in the first place.
Right. Yeah. I had a scholarship from my church for, I think, the first year or two until one of the other youth group members, a male, decided to go, and then he got it. So it was, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went into ministry. I went into church ministry or church music ministry, because it was every single couple I had ever seen come to our church to go for the youth pastorate had always been guy pastor, female who could sing or play the piano or both. It was very common. The dynamic duo, and so I kind of wanted that to be my life, because it's like that was where I saw the most functional teamwork, was in those youth pastors and their wives.
Yeah, it's definitely true that there's a real heavy emphasis on the couples aspect of this. The funny part is that a lot of churches are only willing to pay the pastor,
Right.
not the pastor's wife. And a lot of times you don't even get that. The one and only quote unquote position that I ever held in ministry was unpaid. And I went into it with the understanding that we would start getting paid within a certain time frame. And then, of course, they sat us down in a board, or they sat me down in a board meeting and explained to me that this wasn't going to be happening and gave a bunch of bullshit reasons why. But a lot of times, if you're lucky enough to be getting paid to do ministry work, usually it is only the pastor who is going to get paid. But the pastor's wife sometimes has even more responsibilities than he does. And she is not on the payroll.
No.
These are things that they don't tell you when they are trying to get you to squander your intellect in Bible college. They don't tell you just how few opportunities there are going to be for you out there. And let's talk a little bit about Valley Forge Christian College, shall we? Forbes magazine says that Valley Forge Christian College is one of the worst schools out there if you want to actually see a good return on investment with your college dollars. How bad? Well, in August of 2013, Forbes magazine posted an article that reveals Valley Forge Christian College as being the second worst college in the United States of America in terms of return on an investment. What was the net loss that you could expect here? Let's see. I got to scroll down and find it again. Where did it go? Okay, so here we go. When you look at their numbers for Valley Forge Christian College, a 4-year degree costs $114,100. The 30-year return on investment in the money that you spend there is negative $178,000.
That's crazy.
In other words, there is no chance of you having a career if you go to this school and get a degree there. Period. End of story. And you know what? Just so they can't say that I'm sitting here and blasting them specifically, this is true of almost every Bible college out there. Most of them are cookie cutter versions of each other, and there are a few extreme examples. But for the most part, this is what you're going to get when you decide to go to Bible college. A useless degree that you can do nothing with, that will bring you nothing but ruin. It's that simple. I'm 48 years old, and we are suffering some pretty heavy financial issues right now. And most of it goes back to the fact that I'm not a fucking lawyer. And I should have been. I'm just saying, I set foot on this campus for the first time in 1987 and had 2 years to mull over just how bad this place was. But since God hadn't given me any other direction, it just stuck in my head that I needed to go there. And I knew how bad it was going to be. I knew long before, 2 years before I set foot on that campus as a student, I knew how bad it was, and I went anyway, because that's what happens when the influences in your life are telling you that this is what God wants for you. You listen to the people that you consider to be authorities and spiritual authorities. So even knowing what I knew about the place, I still put in my application, and I still showed up there in September of 1989.
I went because I didn't know what else to do. And going there was, the first year was great. It was a blast. But I was already having problems, and I had problems because I had other problems. Doing stuff there was hard. I didn't know how to drive. I didn't have a car. There was nothing going on. I met some really great people when I went to college. The people I was always attracted to and always struck me were the people who weren't dogmatic about their faith, they had questions. They were imperfect people. Unfortunately, those people were, they were passed over a lot.
They were passed over a lot, and there's also the harsh reality that most of them that I'm aware of, that I still know where they are and what they're doing, the vast majority of them are still mired in the evangelical Kool-Aid.
Right. Some of them, yeah.
That even the ones that were more normal, the ones that I could stand to be around, most of them are still in this.
Oh, yeah.
And it really is disheartening to me when I realize how many of the people that were there that seemed semi-normal, that were easy to talk to and easy to be around, are still out there and mired in this evangelical Kool-Aid. They're still in the church. They don't like what I'm doing. They haven't for years. I'm not talking specifically about this podcast, this one thing, but they don't like how I'm living my life. And it's obvious. And it really is sad that so many of the people that I liked and had relationships with just flat out don't want anything to do with me anymore. Yeah. It really is sad.
Yeah, there are no friends from that time of my life who have stuck around. None of the women friends that I made. Mostly because, seriously, if you think about it, being friends with somebody who doesn't follow your faith, if you're married to a man who is in the ministry, you can't have friends outside the faith.
You can't have a ministry.
Yes.
If your wife is not a believer, good luck finding a position in the first place.
Yeah.
And if you are single as a man, good luck finding a position in the first place, because what was the problem that I encountered in my senior year? It was that I was still single. We were supposed to be getting married in September. Remember that?
Yes.
That we had put a date in September. I believe it was supposed to be September 11th. So thankfully that actually didn't pan out.
Oh, dear.
But we moved our date up to the end of May, 3 weeks after my graduation, because I needed to be able to walk into those interviews and tell these people that I was going to be married, because obviously a little chunk of gold on your ring finger on your left hand is going to keep your penis out of an underage vagina.
There you go.
Come on. Seriously? But they were serious. And if I wanted to have a job in this organization, then I had to be able to prove that I had access to those things outside of the youth group. That's really what it boiled down to.
Right.
It's ridiculous and stupid and silly, because I knew of several people that we went to school with that went out into the world to become pedophiles to one degree or another. You think it's just a Catholic thing? Oh,
no,
hell no.
No.
The way that they make you think about sex in evangelical religion sets you up for all kinds of very socially unacceptable sexual deviancy.
Oh, yeah.
And Bible college teaches you this with some of their extreme rules. There are some Bible colleges out there that literally will put huge restrictions on what men and women can do in terms of their interaction with each other. Pensacola College, where is this? I just saw this a couple of minutes ago. Pensacola College has separate elevators for men and women so that you can avoid love in an elevator. Hey, guys. Shh. Hey, come here. Shh. Getting close. I've got a secret for you. There are gays and lesbians at your school, too. They're there. So that's not going to have the effect that you think it's going to, okay? So basically, Pensacola also has a lot of other rules that try and keep them separated. There are, and this isn't just there. This was true at Valley Forge when we were there. And I'm not sure what it's like now. It's been a lot of years. I've heard that they had in the works some kind of a system where you could have men and women in the same dorm, but they would be on separate floors and there would be restricted areas and all of this. They do everything that they can to keep those bodies from slapping. Guess what? They do anyway, because at the end of the day, as I have said many, many times before, people are just simply going to do what they want. And they're going to figure out ways to do what they want. So you can put up any rule you want, but if that rule goes counter to what that person intends to do, they're going to figure out a way around it. They're going to
yeah.
figure out a way to break it. And you, as the administration of this school, are never going to know unless they're sloppy.
Yeah.
And unless somebody gets pregnant.
Another thing about my school, when I went there my first year, there was this really sweet girl, and she'd probably never been out of the nest at all before because she met a guy. They hooked up, started dating. I don't know if there was, a hookup as the modern term is, but
Hookup means something different to our generation.
Yes. They got involved together, and they were dating. And of course, I don't think that she had ever dated before because they went home for Christmas break and got married.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Never returned.
I don't know if I know the couple, but I remember hearing this story. This had to be right when you got there, wasn't it?
This was pretty much right when I got there. This was the first year I was there, and I was like, they got married? They've known each other since September.
They wanted to fuck.
And yes.
They wanted to fuck.
Was it.
In evangelical circles, especially in Bible college, will you marry me simply means I want to fuck you. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And there were so many. I can think of at least 2 or 3 couples right off the top of my head that met in September and were living in the married student dorms in January.
Oh, yeah.
And like major life decisions over a few very normal, very human kinds of impulses. And now you have to make it a legal contract so that you two can get together and do the wild thing. It makes no sense whatsoever.
No.
It's crazy how they get you thinking and what they will get you to do to remain in compliance.
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine why they don't have some sort of counseling. I think that, honestly, the scary part is that there's no advice. You can't go to anyone for advice.
Not at the school, but most pastors will insist on at least 1 or 2 sessions of counseling. We had to do it.
Yeah, we had to do it.
And it was stupid.
We watched videos.
We watched videos of a guy talking in very uncomfortable ways about uncomfortable subjects for 2 virgins who have been warm for each other's form for 3 years.
It was terrible.
The record, we waited. You were my first.
Yep.
And I love everything that we have. And I love the fact that we share this thing between the two of us.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, it really, it made us even do things that we probably wouldn't have done under more rational circumstances. I don't think that you and I would have gotten married as early as we did. I think we probably still would have, but I don't think that we would have done it as early as we did if it wasn't for the fact that I needed to have some sort of street cred to be a youth pastor.
Yeah.
And also that it had been over 3 years and both of us had a pretty bad itch.
Yeah.
That's a lot of it right there.
Well, yeah, because people are people and they're human.
I wonder if any of the lifetime atheists that listen to this show can even fathom waiting 3 years. Oh, four. It was 4. 4 years to sleep with somebody.
Yeah. It was just, there was a lot of problems on that campus. There were people who had massive financial aid who had to work at the school.
A lot of schools have work study.
Right, they do. But it's just these people barely had educations a lot of the time. If they went to a Christian school.
I was going to say, if you go to a Christian college, you're barely getting an education anyway.
But the amount of people who couldn't write a sentence, who couldn't read effectively. I remember we had to read stuff out loud in a couple of the classes, and it's just reading was hard.
A lot of people, they couldn't read out loud. And you don't have to talk to me about how bad people's writing skills were, because I was the one that they used to come to proofread their papers, because they knew that was how I saved myself in most of my classes. I was a terrible test taker. I would get D's and F's on my tests all the time, but I was a stellar writer even back then. And that skill really, really saved me.
Yeah.
Because I got almost straight A's on all of my papers. And when word about that started getting around, people started coming to me for advice. I had people handing me their papers and offering me money to fix them so that they would get a better grade. It's like, I will transcribe, I will not edit. Wherever you put a comma, that's where the comma is going, even if it pains me to put it there, because this is your paper.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not going to take money to help you get a better grade. And I had ethics,
Yeah.
and I wasn't writing other people's term papers for them.
No.
I did help and collaborate a few times with people who just really needed the help and didn't come waving $10 or $20 in my face. I was more than happy to help at that point, but I'm not going to help you cheat.
Yeah.
Even as useless as that education was, there's still such a thing as personal ethics.
Yeah.
And regardless of where that paper was going to take them in life, they needed to get there on their own. And it was a situation that I found myself in more than once. And some of these people really, honestly, could not form a coherent sentence or thought to be able to put together a term paper that was supposed to explain anything.
Yeah.
And that, well, with all due respect, it is the fault of the public school system too, because we've grown very, very lax in terms of what we teach people about writing and about English language and sentence structure and all of that. There's very, very little about it in high school anymore. I can remember it starting as early as 4th or 5th grade for me, learning how to construct essays and that sort of thing. I don't know how much of that there is anymore. So I'm not calling this a Christian school thing, but you could almost always, back then, you could almost always tell the ones that had been to a Christian school versus a public school.
Yeah.
Things have gotten worse in public school over the last couple of decades. But back in the 80s, when you read certain people's papers, it was a good litmus test for where they went to high school.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The girls had chapel services every so often. Do you remember dorm services?
Oh, yeah. We had dorm chapels all the time.
And I remember there was just one in particular that I just remember because I was like, are you serious? Why are we talking about this? But it was, I think, the wife of one of the administrators was giving the talk. And I'm not even going to call it a sermon because it wasn't a sermon. But she was basically talking to us about what was expected of a pastor's wife or of a wife in general. And it was crazy. The one thing I can remember is that she was saying that she used to wear her hair in a ponytail. She used to wear her hair in a ponytail until her mother-in-law told her that it looked like crap. And then she didn't wear her hair in a ponytail ever again.
Do you remember that one interview that I went on with that crazy church where they took us out to lunch?
Yeah.
And the pastor's wife started complaining about some ballet thing that she had seen because of the costumes, because it showed too much of the body.
Yeah, she was talking about some woman in the church who had her daughters in ballet, and she's like, I can't believe she's doing that. You know, they wear those skimpy leotards. And I'm like, it's dance.
The point of the leotard is to bring out the curves of the body, because the curves of the body are part of the dance.
Ballet has a very, very specific look they are looking for.
Yes.
It's all about the thin, lithe bodies. Mm-hmm. And it's not sexual. It's just aesthetic.
It's aesthetic, and it's kind of necessary for some of the things that those bodies have to do.
Yes. You can't have baggy clothes and do ballet. No, you don't. You don't dance in sweats. You dance in leggings at the most.
Right. This was an interview that we went on while I was still in college. Didn't you actually come down for that?
Yes, I was there.
Yes. Yeah, you came down for this one.
I was there, and I was having a time. We were both having a time.
Yeah.
Because it was terrible. This oh God, just driving down in that snowstorm.
Oh man, yeah, I remember that. But this looked so promising. It looked so good. It really looked like it was going to be a go if they were just able to meet you. And then I can remember afterward having this conversation, whether we were in the car or someplace else. And I remember saying to you, am I the only one that has a really, really bad vibe about this? And you said, no, you are definitely not.
Yeah, I was like, I'm scared. If you get this position, I was scared. I was like, I don't know if I can be with these people.
Oh, I knew I couldn't. So you
was
really had
like-
nothing to worry about. I was more concerned that I was going to be offered something and then would have to explain to my youth pastor and my senior pastor, who had just invested an entire summer in me and my internship, that I was offered a job and turned it down.
Yeah.
I was scared to death that they were going to offer that to me because I knew that it would drive me as crazy as they were in short form.
But we were also kind of like, it was a good position for a youth pastor. It was a good position.
It was lucrative. It was 1993, and the salary was $35,000 a year.
Right.
That was a lot of money, especially in a ministry type position where
yeah.
most first positions are unpaid.
And they had a house for us to live in.
Yes.
And they were but I can remember because I remember the situation. And I was like, they were like, we don't want your wife to work. They were really, really, really adamant about, we don't want your wife to work.
And you know what? I thought about that a few years later. Did you ever see the movie The Firm?
Yeah, probably.
It was a long time ago, but this crazy firm that Tom Cruise gets a job in, they didn't want his wife working either.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing I thought of. It's like, okay, so you're and now I've said before that I always wanted to be a lawyer. It's like in some weird parallel universe, this is what my law career could look like. But yeah, it was one of those crazy things that that was born out of the same kind of thinking that that enforces an 11 o'clock curfew on a 22-year-old. It's crazy.
I've never had a curfew either before I came to school. I would just figured, well, okay, I guess.
And when we showed up for orientation, well, because we didn't do this together, it was 2 years apart, but I'm certain that it was the same for you, where they sat us down in the chapel, and the first thing that they said to us was that they intended to treat us like adults. The second thing out of their mouths was, oh, by the way, there's an 11 o'clock curfew during the week, and it's 1 o'clock on the weekends.
Yeah.
It's going to be and 1 o'clock on Saturday. How does that motivate you to go to church?
Yeah, right.
But I mean, the whole thing was crazy, and I regularly violated curfew because I was working, which was allowed. So that didn't take off of my deportment.
Yeah.
My deportment score. I guess I should explain.
Deportment.
I guess I should explain what that is. Okay. So basically, if you're a Harry Potter fan, think of this as the point system, only it's very individual.
Yes.
Okay. You lose points for not going to church. Mm-hmm. You lose points for taking too many cuts in your classes.
Being out of dress code.
You lose points for being out of dress code. You lose points for skipping chapel. All of the ways that you could lose points. And oddly enough, for almost every one of my semesters at Valley Forge, I had somewhere, it was either a 90 or 100 because, I did miss church a couple of times, and it was always the weeks that they checked. And I mean, I could have lied. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people did.
Oh, yeah.
But I was truthful when I didn't go to church. And it did affect my deportment score. Those deportment scores, what a lovely name. Those deportment scores were also shared with potential employers. So if a pastor or his hiring team showed up on campus and saw that your deportment score was 92, but someone else was 94, they already had a better chance of getting that job.
Yeah.
And our deportment scores were, they were made a big deal over. They were made to seem very, very important. And in some ways they were. But also they were used to exact spite, which... and I thought about this years later too, when I think it's in The Order of the Phoenix,
Yeah.
where Draco Malfoy, he becomes a prefect
Uh-huh.
and starts taking points away from all the Gryffindors. 5 points from you, Harry, because I don't like you. And it wasn't far off.
No.
It wasn't far off because you remember my very first semester, I lost 50 deportment points my very first semester because your RA was telling me that I needed to be quiet in chapel. And I think I had leaned over to say something to you that couldn't be heard by anyone else in the place. And she pokes me hard on the shoulder and shushes me. And I looked at her. I said, "Who are you, my mother?" And turned back around. That cost me 50 points because she went
my
crying to the
God.
Dean of Men.
I don't.
That was
There's
your
a
RA the
lot.
first semester that I was
Yeah,
there.
I don't even remember who my RA was.
I do. I'm not going to say her name out loud. I'll tell you after.
No, don't worry about it. I don't remember her name. I can see her now, but I've forgotten a lot because it was a hard time for me. It was
I've
very
forgotten
hard.
a lot too. I remember more things about some of the things that happened in classes and things that impressed me about my professors than I remember about anything else.
Yeah.
Most of the students didn't impress me. Most of them I just knew that I would never be able to get along with. And even the ones that I met right away, I can think about
Yeah.
this core group of people and thinking, I don't know if this is the group of people I want to spend the next 4 years of my life socializing with. Although there was one person in that group, and one of the very, very, very first people that I met on that campus, who I am still in contact with today.
Yes.
And he's still evangelical, but we have a very, very good relationship. And he, I think, is more of a truth seeker than he lets on.
Probably.
But then he was one of the first, and he is still around.
Yeah.
And that's pretty interesting. But almost everybody else who was in that group that first night or those first couple of nights, no. One of them is in jail. And
Yeah.
and that was another really horrible situation. But even that guy was, oddly enough, one of the more normal ones on that campus. It was crazy, but all of this shit was going on in his head the whole time. And the sexual restrictions that were placed on all students, it was too much for a lot of guys. Most of us had a good stash of porn. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because even though I believed wholeheartedly in what I was doing, I still had a drive.
Yeah.
And I was still a man. And I still had specific needs that were not going to be met in any other way than in my own imagination. And that is why there was a lot of porn on that campus.
Yeah.
There was an incredible amount of porn on that campus.
Oh, I can
There was an
imagine.
incredible amount of alcohol on that campus, because especially in the guys' dorms, remember the drop ceilings?
Oh, yeah.
Perfect place to store that stuff. Although I wasn't even anywhere near that creative. If my RA had wanted to find something or had any thought that I might have something in that room that shouldn't be there, he could have found it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt in my mind, and it would have caused all kinds of problems. And yet, for well over 3 of those years, I had at least a small stash of porn in that room because I needed something to provide myself with a little bit of a release and a little bit of comfort.
Yeah.
Because being with you and not being able to have the relationship I wanted with you was very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And it's difficult for a lot of guys. So that little bit of harmless stimulation can really help quell a lot of that. So depending on how you use it and what kind of stuff you're into and what it does to your head, porn can actually be a very healthy thing when used the right way. I guess I don't know how to say that without it sounding gross, but it can have a therapeutic effect, especially in an environment that is as repressive as a Bible college campus.
Oh, yeah.
So most of us had our stashes, whether it was porn, whether it was alcohol, whether it was weed, that was there too. And the funny thing is, I'm high almost 24/7 these days. But back then, the very notion of being in the same room with one nug of marijuana was terrifying.
Yeah.
Because of the way that I was brought up to think about it.
Plus, we were all taught that it was the gateway drug, that it was all sorts of terrible things would happen if you dared to smoke marijuana.
And that wasn't an evangelical thing.
No, that was everything. That was
that's
public
Reefer
school.
Madness 101. It
Right.
wasn't just our campus.
No.
That was a society thing too.
Yes.
But it didn't make it any better to know that you were constantly looking over your shoulder, and if your dorm mate was smoking weed, you could get in trouble for it. I mean, we saw that. We saw how they can take an entire group of people and blame them for something.
Yeah.
Remember when they marched all those people up in front of us in chapel because one of the lesser liked people on that campus got a little bit of comeuppance from a couple of people?
Oh, God, yeah,
Okay.
I remember him.
So there was this one situation the very first year that I was on campus where there was this guy who was a little bit more arrogant than average. He was a little bit less likable than average and had created a few more waves than he probably realized he had. And one night, a bunch of people showed up outside his dorm room and kind of what was the final thing they did? They didn't tie him to a flagpole, but there was something that involved him and a flagpole and I don't remember all the it's 30 years ago.
Underwear up the flagpole.
Yeah, that's what it was. It was something like that. They ran his underwear up the flagpole or some stupidity, and anyone who had the nerve to open their dorm room door and stick their head out into the hall that night was hauled in front of the entire student body during chapel and forced to apologize to this kid.
Oh, boy.
And one of our closest friends, actually two of our closest friends, were involved in that and had nothing to do with it. They were guilty by association and nothing else. And after that happened in September, it was like within weeks of the start of school.
Oh, yeah.
It happened in September, and it took them until the end of October to decide what to do with these people. And in the interim, they weren't allowed to leave campus. They did because I smuggled a couple of them off myself. But they weren't supposed to be leaving campus, so they were basically being held prisoner while their case was being reviewed.
Yeah.
And the final solution to this problem was to bring all of these people into chapel, parade them like a fucking chain gang up to the front, and have them all apologize in turn to this kid for something that was nothing more than a stunt. There were no bodily injuries. No one was really harmed. Someone got embarrassed and probably deserved it. Knowing who it was, I would say that he probably pissed the wrong people off at one point and deserved precisely what he got. That is something, if they wanted to teach him a life lesson, then that should have been the Dean of Men's solution there.
Right.
That should have been the solution. Okay, so you've done this, 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 and this, and your name has come up in this situation, in this situation, in this situation. Buddy, what did you expect?
Yeah.
Suck it up and just get on with your life. That's the way any rational thinking person would have dealt with that. It was a college campus prank and nothing more. No one got hurt and a point was made, but then they had to blow it completely out of proportion. And that is the kind of thing that happens on a lot of these campuses. They want to make sure that you understand that they are the ones in charge. Liberty University, aside from, let's forget about the fact that they actually have a rule about hugs that last longer than 3 seconds. They're also one of the strictest on things like attire, and they have, there was another one. Oh, yeah, this was the one. Liberty University has the right to randomly drug test students.
Yeah, that's...
So, abandon all hope of smoking any weed your 4 years at Liberty. Because, I mean, if you test positive for THC, you're out. And they can hand you a cup and ask you to pee in it any time they want. It really is quite scary, the level of control that they think they can have over you. And even though your average workplace has control over whether or not you smoke weed, because any workplace can call for a drug test if they want to, but it really boggles my mind how these people think that something that you do that doesn't affect your study, doesn't affect what you do on campus in terms of the purpose of you being there in the first place, and that is learning. Anything else that you want to do, oh, they want to control that too. Now, at least with a job, it comes with a paycheck.
Yeah.
What about this? How on earth are these people going to tell other people how they can live and things that they can do outside of their little cloister and not give them anything in return for being in compliance? This is why I never worried about it. I discovered weed a lot of years after college. As a matter of fact, it is still a very new thing for me within like the last 3 or 4 years. But my attitude about it was the same back then.
Yeah.
I was terrified of the concept, but I also knew that what I didn't do wasn't going to hurt me. And the sheer number of times that I had been told that my faith was personal.
Yeah.
It made me think, well, then shouldn't the decisions that I make about how I manage my faith be personal? And if I don't have a problem with seeing an R-rated movie, then isn't that a matter for me to deal with my God over?
Yeah.
Why do you need to be involved? Because you want control. And that is what this religion is about. It is about control. And if they can get you into that control mindset while you're in college, they've got you.
Yeah.
I was never completely reined in. And I was very compliant. I was on campus by 11 when I needed to be, unless I was working, and then I had an excuse and it was excused. But I never just violated curfew for the purpose of violating curfew. I followed the rules. I did what I was supposed to do. But the sheer audacity of, and I had this conversation with an older student, and they had actually upped the ante by the time I had left. I don't know if this was a thing when you were there, but they had upped the ante to not only do you need to be on campus at 11, but you need to be in your own dorm.
Yeah.
I remember one time my RA threatening to write me up because I had left a notebook in my car. And at 11:20 at night, he heard the front door open, saw me go out to the parking lot, which was only about 50 feet away, grabbed my notebook and come back inside, and I got a lecture about violating curfew.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you heard the door open, right? You saw me go out. You saw me come back. I was here, but you left again. I didn't leave again. I went to my car to get a notebook so I could study for a test that I'm taking tomorrow. That's how crazy it can get. And that's the level of control that they try to exact on you. And I told him, I literally looked at him and I said, you know what? You want to write me up for this? Go ahead and write me up for it. And we'll go talk to the dean together about the ridiculousness of me not being allowed to go and get a notebook in my car. I went to the parking lot, not paoli, okay?
Yeah.
I literally, that was the phrase I used with him. I remember it like it was yesterday. But that was one of the things that has always stuck with me about just how much control they wanted to have. My RA heard that front door open and he sprung into action and was ready to write me up for going to retrieve study material.
Yeah. Crazy.
Very. So one of the little miracles of broadcasting and audio production is that you can pause and kind of collect your thoughts a little bit. And we were just doing that, a little bit of collaboration as to where we wanted to go next with this, because there's just so much. I feel like this could be a 3-hour episode or it could be a 2-parter. I'm not sure yet. I want to see how much raw audio I have with this and decide whether or not I want to do 1 or 2. The sheer number of rules that our school had that were designed for no grander purpose than control and it was crazy. It was absolutely batshit insane. The things that they expected of us and the way that they expected us to conduct ourselves, even off campus. I got news for you guys. I had porn on your campus and I drank after I was 21. Why? Because it was fucking legal and it was my decision. Yeah. Okay. And we had to travel like an hour away from campus to feel safe, to just go out and have a drink.
Right.
And we didn't do this often. I've never been a drinker. But it was nice those few times that myself and a couple of our friends got together to just go out and be adults for a little while.
Yeah.
Being adults capable of making good decisions. No one was drunk when we left the bar. Everyone was okay to drive. And in one circumstance in particular, I remember we had one friend who was an alcoholic who volunteered to make the trip with us and be the designated driver so that the rest of us could drink as much as we wanted. I'm 48 years old. I get high every single day on marijuana, but I've still, in my entire life, never been drunk on alcohol.
No.
So it's one of those things that it was just never a priority for me. Even though it was a taboo thing where we went to school, it was still never a priority for me because alcohol was always around when I was a kid.
Right.
I grew up in a real traditional Greek-Italian kind of family. And at Greek Easter, they passed the wineskin and the kids drank too. So there was that aspect of it. The allure of it and the naughtiness aspect of it was not in my head.
Right.
So it was never something that I had any kind of interest in doing, and I still don't. Why? Because I see what drunk people look like, and I don't want to look like that. And I don't like the idea of hangovers. I can smoke weed at 1 o'clock in the morning, go directly to bed, and wake up with a perfectly clear head. So, why would I do something that is going to intentionally make me feel bad in the morning?
Right.
And having to get up and go to work or do whatever else. So for me, it was just never a real priority. But going out for a drink was. And the reason for that is simple. We were adults. We were responsible. And there was no reason, no good moral, ethical, or even spiritual reason for us to not do this. Because when I look at my Bible, I see Jesus making wine out of water.
Right.
Okay? I see him providing the best stuff that they'd had all night at this party after everyone is already pissed up drunk. Because that is when they would usually bring out the lesser quality stuff because, okay, you know what? We're going to make sure that the stragglers are taken care of, but the party's breaking up. No, this first public miracle of Jesus involved getting drunk people more drunk. So if I'm using him as my example, then he shouldn't have a problem with me bellying up to a bar and ordering one Sam Adams and driving home. That's that, and that was really what these nights out looked like. It was us getting together and enjoying being grown-ups.
Yeah.
And having an adult beverage, being responsible about it, and then making our way back to campus. And most colleges are like that. I don't think that there are too many colleges that even worry too much about underage people partaking in things like weed and alcohol on campus. There are, I'm sure, rules about harder drugs, stuff that's actually illegal. It's legal on college campuses too, because as young adults, people who are being placed for the first time in their lives in the position of being able to make adult choices, this is one that really, in the grand scheme of things, is not something that anybody really needs to worry about. Weed has never killed anybody. It's never, it hasn't been associated with any real negative social anything. Regardless of what reefer madness propaganda wants to tell you, it really hasn't had a major impact or a major negative impact on society. So, of course, your average evangelical and your average evangelical Bible college is going to pick up the reefer madness bullshit and run with it. So there wasn't a whole lot of talk about weed, but back then it really wasn't that big of a deal either. And there really weren't that many people that we went to school with that would have even had the inclination to try it because of the cloistered existence that they'd had.
Right.
But for me, it was just a matter of every now and then. And when I say every now and then, I'm talking every month, every 6 weeks. It wasn't like we did this every Friday night. Okay. Once in a while, we just got the urge to go out and be grown-ups. And there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. And we all survived and we all got our degrees. And there are people who were involved in those excursions that are also right now in the ministry. And they're living that life. And they still managed to maintain just enough of their autonomy to be able to enjoy themselves a little bit more in college. And I think that that was a really cool thing that we used to do once all of us were of age and it was legal. It was a cool thing that we did, sneaking off to just have a drink and come back. It would have been even better if we didn't have to hide it.
Right.
But the fact that we were able to do it, and that now there was this bond, this knowing between us that this is what we were doing on the weekend, it was actually kind of fun. And, to quote John Bender in The Breakfast Club, being bad feels pretty good. And now, of course, that's very situational in nature, but you know what I'm talking about. In terms of smoking a little bit of weed or having a couple of beers, being bad in that context, in the context of the rules of a conservative Bible college, it felt really good. It felt really good to just have those small, innocuous moments of rebellion. So I'm looking right now at how much raw audio I have. We're at almost an hour. And I have really just started to scratch the surface of the things that we experienced. There is so much more. So I honestly do think that I want to make this one a two-parter and come back to it and give a little bit more information along some more organized lines. Tonight we're talking about just a few of our experiences, but I want to talk more about the Bible college experience, what you are buying, and what you're going to get back. We already know what it is with our alma mater, but most schools out there have comparable stories in terms of what you can expect to make with one of their degrees. One of the things that appalled me when I first set foot on that campus was learning that you could get a 4-year bachelor's degree in education from this school and still not be qualified to teach in the same state where the school operates.
Right.
Most of the people who went to Valley Forge and were in the Christian Ed program still had to take something like 8 or 12 credits at an accredited college or university to be able to qualify for a teacher's license in that state.
Yep.
So the school didn't even equip you for the career that you were there to be equipped for, because the stuff that they were teaching was so mired down with evangelical bullshit that there wasn't room for the stuff that the state wanted you to learn so that you could be a teacher in that state. It was incredible how these people made the conscious decision to go to a school and get a degree that they knew walking out the door would be useless.
Yeah.
It boggles my mind how people, and myself included, how anyone could look at that and make the conscious decision to squander their intellect in an environment that isn't even going to provide them with a job when they get out.
No. I
mean, the Christian Ed program actually gave people more opportunities than most of the other majors, because what were the other majors at that point? You could get a bachelor's degree in Bible, you could get a 1-year Bible certificate, and the majors were the most idiotic things out there.
They were concentrations.
Yeah.
They weren't majors.
Missions, pastoral ministry, church music. Was there anything else at that point?
There used to be a Jewish studies, but I only knew one person in that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't much.
I think I know the person that you're referring to also.
Yeah.
They had that stuff in there for people who had Jewish backgrounds. Because there were plenty of evangelicals that had Jewish backgrounds, and some that even managed to migrate back toward those roots. This one friend that I was talking about previously, he's a Messianic Jew.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's the term that he likes the best. And I'm pretty sure that he listens. Hi, I'm pretty sure that he listens, and you know what, you can correct me on that if you want. But I think that that's pretty much how he identifies. Now, I think the saddest part of this whole thing for me was the fact that even though I had you for most of it, we became friends immediately. We started dating almost immediately, although, we didn't
call it dating.
We didn't call it that until December. Even having you around Bible college for me was a very, very lonely experience. Mostly because even back then, I didn't think like most of the people on that campus. I thought that was my problem. I actually did think.
Yeah.
That was my problem, and that was what kept me from having friends. Because I was always one of the first ones to call out the bullshit, and people didn't like that. And it wasn't just there. When I was working in Christian radio, there was one thing that I think really started the ball rolling toward me not working there anymore.
Yeah.
Where someone said something during a meeting that was just so completely out there that I couldn't just let it go. And there were a lot of those moments when I was in school. And, you know, back then, you're young, you have spent the last several years being told how great you are in your own home youth group and whatnot. And then you show up at this campus and all of a sudden, no one's impressed with you. That was what happened with me. Everyone lavished me with all kinds of praise and all kinds of compliments for all of the talents that I had. And then I show up on this campus and I spent 4 years under an invisibility cloak.
Yeah.
Most people completely ignored me. The ones that didn't ignore me didn't like me. And there was just this one small core group of people that we hung around with that were semi-normal and just didn't think the way that the rest of those people thought. I was very thankful that there were at least a few, but by law of averages, there had to be at least a few. And smart people have a tendency to gravitate toward each other. And we did. The ones that had coherent thoughts about our faith and questioned things and were comfortable discussing them amongst ourselves. These things, these early interactions and learning that there were other people out there that didn't fall in lockstep with the way these people thought and the way they and the things that they taught, it was good for me. It was really good for me because even though I spent 4 years in basically abject loneliness, it was still good for me to know that I wasn't alone in the way that I thought about things.
Yeah.
But when you're on a campus with 600 people and you've got a small group of 3, 4, or 5 people that are more against the grain than the rest, it's difficult to be taken seriously by anyone else on that campus. And it's also difficult to maintain good, solid social relationships because outside of that tiny little bubble was this whole culture that I was separated from because I couldn't deal with the way that the people inside that culture thought or behaved. And that was really difficult for me, especially the first year where I was trying to establish who the better people were to hang around with, you know, who was going to actually be, well, I don't want to say the better people. That sounds terrible. The people who I had the best chance of getting along with.
Right.
Okay. That's more accurate. And I was right most of the time. The people that I liked on that campus and that I got to be friendly with, I remained friendly with for most of the time I was there. I also had extreme anger management issues that made it difficult to get close to me. But there were people that were able to break through all of that too. And the sad part is that a couple of them are not in our lives anymore because they got so mired in the Kool-Aid that it's difficult to even talk to them, much less have a relationship with them anymore.
Yeah.
And it's very sad because there were certain people that we were very close to that just went completely off the rails over the years. Yeah. And it sucks because I miss them. Mm-hmm. There are friends that I have that I miss sorely, but I know full well that I would never be able to spend time with them anymore. My best friend in high school, I would never be able to spend 5 minutes with her anymore.
Yeah.
It's awful what this religion does to the way that you think, even to the point where you can have 2 kids that are like thick as thieves for 3-4 years in high school, and now can't even talk to each other because of differences of opinion over this. And the sad part is my grandmother used to tell me all the time that once you're in college and you're an adult, that's when you're going to find the people that are going to be the long-term friends.
Yeah. Really?
Because I barely talk to anyone from college anymore. I can count on one hand the number of people who haven't left me in the dust.
Yeah.
And of those, there are a couple that I can't really follow on social media because their conservative views are so extreme at this point that I am afraid that if I keep looking at their content, that I'm going to start engaging with them in a way that will end the relationship.
Yeah.
So I've learned, like I said a couple episodes back, that there are hills to die on. This is not one of them either. Okay. So I kind of keep to myself. I unfollow on social media, but they're still there and they're still friends on my friends list and they can still contact me through various means, but I am not reading their rhetoric in my feed.
Right.
And this is, for me, the right balance. It strikes a good balance between maintaining some relationships that I had back then and still being able to think clearly and not get pissed off at their opinions. So that's the way that I choose to manage this. I'm having a hard time figuring out how I really want to end this part of it because we've determined that we're going to do a part 2.
Yeah.
And this is such a personal thing for me. It's hard for me to pull out the details that I really want to share here. But I want to talk very specifically right now to any young person who is considering going to Bible college right now. Okay? I want you to take just a couple of minutes and forget about every conversation that you have had with your youth pastor about this. Forget about every conversation that you've had with your parents. Ask yourself, what kind of life do I want to have? There are plenty of college degrees out there, whether they come from Christian colleges or elsewhere, that are utterly useless. College these days is largely useless, and the return on investment is always small. Over 30 years, the ROI on most college educations is incredibly small, but not all of them carry a negative $170,000 rating. Okay? And that is what you are buying for yourself if you go to Bible college. What do you who are supposedly made in the image and likeness of your creator? So if that's true, then you must think kind of alike. It would have to be a thing, wouldn't it? If you are the image and likeness of your creator. So think about what you want to do with your life. What is it that you want to be when you grow up? It's important. It matters. Your opinion and your wants matter. Okay? If your God is as powerful as your youth pastor wants you to think he is, he could tell you all by himself, all on his own, what he wants from you. He does not need a mouthpiece. Be very, very, very cautious and weary of anyone who tries to tell you that God told them anything about you. Because if you have a relationship with your creator, then he should be able to speak to you directly. Always weigh what you are told by other people about what God wants for you against what you want for you. Because as Susan B. Anthony told us, God's opinion is almost always going to be in lockstep with yours. Okay? So if the ministry looks like something attractive, let me make sure that you understand something. There are a lot of really evil people in the ministry. Okay? There are those who are out there who have been doing this for a lot of years and have been doing it from a very opportunistic angle. And they're looking to up the status of their church with the people that they hire to work there. And it all turns into marketing after a while. You were talking earlier about what the average couple looks like as a youth pastor couple. Well, that's all marketing. They had an image that they wanted to express and still do. When you are deciding what your future is going to look like, ask yourself whether or not, A, you really want to commit to a life of being a pastor or a missionary or something along those lines, because most people flat out don't. I didn't. I really didn't want to be a pastor. I just wanted to serve people in a spiritual capacity, and this was the easiest way to do it. You see, my youth pastor saw that I was a very mobile kind of person, that I wasn't a pew sitter, that I liked to be involved. And that's where the whole God told me thing came from, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Because I had the ability, and I wasn't afraid to talk in front of people. I wasn't afraid to pick up my guitar after 3 days and strum some chords and try and have a nice worship service, because the keyboard just started getting a little bit too clunky. So I learned how to play the guitar. And it was considered, it was considered remarkable that I would pick up a guitar and 2 weeks later I'm leading song services with it. And that was used as proof that this was one of the things that God wanted for me, because he equipped me with the ability to do that. No, I just sort of picked up the guitar and it clicked with me, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I taught myself. I had taken piano lessons, so I had the music theory going in. And I was just kind of able to do it. Not great at the beginning, but I could hold my own with some chords. But all of these things were used as evidences that this was what God wanted for me. What does being able to play a C chord on the guitar have to do with a lifetime calling into ministry? Well, it wasn't that I had a lifetime calling into ministry. It was that my youth pastor was enthusiastic about the concept of recreating himself. And I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode, where he actually said to me one time that a gauge of your success is the number of times you recreate yourself over the course of your career. Right. In other words, how many people you drag into this. Yeah. And that's problematic. I didn't see it that way at the time, obviously, but it really is problematic. So there are things that you need to be thinking about. Number one, the fact that you will not be able to get a normal job. You will be stuck doing something in the ministry, or you will be stuck figuring out something else. And that was where I found myself. 3 years out of college, I was shoving chickens on a spit at Boston Market. Okay? 5 years out of college, I was working in IT and had to go back for more training for that. But it turned out to be a really, really volatile career choice. So there have been issues. There have been lots of bumps in the road that would have been solved by me simply not squandering my intellect in a school that was going to give me nothing in return. My responsibility back then was to look at what future I wanted for myself and figure out how to make that. And then I wound up at a fucking retreat, speaking in tongues and making commitments at 15 that I had no business making and that no one had any business shoving me into. But those decisions led to 4 years of absolute agony and frustration. I remember certain things in a positive way. There were a lot of things that I found engaging about my classes, even though it was all bullshit. I found it was engaging bullshit. At least the professors made it that way. Yeah. And there were several professors at that school that I did really enjoy sitting under, getting their perspectives on things. One of them in particular, who I honestly and truly believe is responsible for 99 and 100% of where I am right now, because he was the one that had the most heavy emphasis on independent thought.
Yeah.
I can remember one of the first classes that I took with him, where he was recounting an interaction that he had had with a student, where the student had asked him, well, are you ever going to give us anything here that we can use? And now the context of that, obviously, this was a young ministry student. He was looking for something that he could use from the pulpit. Mm-hmm. But the way the question was framed, this particular professor just couldn't help himself. And his response was classic. He's like, you mean like your brain? Mm. It was the first time that I can remember anyone in authority suggesting that I think about anything. But from that day forward, I was committed to rational thought. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy that this seed got planted in my head the first year that I was in Bible college. But you know what? I took his advice and I learned to think. And I thought my way right out of that religion. Eventually. It only took about 25 years.
Yeah.
But I still knew then. I still knew just how crazy things were. Being on campus for less than 3 days and being told that the fuse in my room blew because I had skipped chapel. No, the fuse in my room blew because that thing was probably 20 fucking years old and needed to be replaced.
At least 20 years
Okay.
old.
So what did I do? I went to the local hardware store. I bought a fuse and put it back in. I guess that I have a little bit more power over this than God. But that was one of the things that was told to me. This was the assistant RA in our building, walking by my room, seeing that it was dark. And he's like, that's what happens when you don't put God first. I was in my room, and by his own perception, and this wasn't what was happening. I was in my room, and he thought that I was just watching TV instead of going to chapel. How you determine that from everything in the room being turned off and not able to turn back on is beyond me. But apparently, the way that things were in these buildings, it would only affect like 1 or 2 dorm rooms when a fuse blew. So because I was in there and because I skipped chapel, God wasn't happy, so he cut the electricity. Like that was supposed to get me to leave my dorm room and go to church or go to chapel or whatever it was. But there were so many examples of things like that, and the ridiculous things that people would say, the way that they treated people, the way that other people treated other people in front of me. Let's not even talk about some of the horrific things that happened to me and some of the people that I encountered and the awful things that they did and said to me. Just watching what happened between other people. That incident where they marched all those people in front of us in chapel was a prime example of this. And I can remember sitting there in chapel that day and feeling so uncomfortable and thinking to myself, this was a prank. You're taking it to the nth degree for no reason whatsoever because this kid's father was kind of a bigwig in the assemblies. Yeah. So they chose a prominent pastor's kid to pull a prank on, and it turned into World War IV.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous how that was handled. And honestly, it was one of the things that made me think early on that this was a bad idea. But every time I brought up the concept of leaving, okay, I'm not blaming you because I know.
But I panicked.
I know where your thought processes were.
Yeah.
So I don't blame you. But every single time I brought up the concept of not wanting to do this anymore, you just went completely into panic mode.
Yeah.
So
but I did that for most things.
For a lot of things. Yeah, I know. But this one involved me directly and wound up involving me for 25 years.
Yeah.
And it's that mindset that drives you to make decisions, bad decisions, that will follow you for basically your entire life. Mm-hmm. I'm 48 years old. I have almost no money in the bank. I have just the slightest semblance of a career. My job is a glorified retail job with an interesting product.
Yeah.
And that's really all I have. I am a freelance copywriter and I'm a driving instructor. Yes, I'm a driving instructor who sells weed. But that's my thing. Those are my sources of income. So you can't really call what I have a career like I would have had if I had gone to a real college. Now, obviously, that's not a given either because there are plenty of people out there that have degrees in their back pockets and are still waiting tables. I get that. It's tough all over. But can you maybe start your college experience with fewer than 2 strikes against you? Because that's what happens when you go to Bible college, okay? That's what you get. You walk into a situation where you already have 2 strikes against you. You have almost no chance of getting a good job on your way out. And the vast majority of first ministry positions are unpaid. All this talk that you'll hear about clothing allowances and book allowances and free parsonages to live in and all of this stuff, most of it is fantasy.
Yeah.
I managed to interview with a church that kind of was the fantasy.
Yeah.
In terms of what they were willing to provide for us.
Yeah, but it was
But the cost of having to work with those people and ultimately become like them was too great.
Yeah.
It was too great.
It was really scary.
And I knew just how bad things were. And it was a very scary time thinking about that job and the possibility of being offered that position, because I didn't think that I would be able to take it, and I didn't know how I was going to explain not.
Yeah.
But just one or two more quick bits of advice here. This is your life. It's time to take it back. Okay? If God has anything to say to you, then let him say it. Oh, and just so you're aware, that thing that you call God is nothing more than your brain telling you to do things. And you need to get to the point where you are involving your rational mind in the process. It's important that your brain is more involved than your heart in decisions that will affect the rest of your life. I cannot go back and do college over. There's no money, and I will leave a mountain of debt for my kid if I go back to school now. There is no way that I can go back and get something better than what I have. And the one time that I tried, I want to say it had to be about 12 years ago now, I was looking at the possibility of going back to school and getting my master's in education. And when I submitted my transcript to the school that I wanted to go to, I found out that I had been lied to years and years and years earlier about the accreditation status of Valley Forge Christian College. They had no mid-states accreditation in the late 80s, and my degree was basically nothing but toilet paper.
Yeah.
And that was it. And that was basically how it was framed with me, is that this is pretty much useless. And I would have to go back and get another bachelor's degree before I could start on a master's, because there wasn't a single credit on that entire transcript that they were willing to consider. So that's another thing. Does the school that you want to go to have accreditation? Can you do anything with these secular credits that you are accumulating in areas like English and math and whatnot? Can you move any of it? Can you use any of it toward a real degree? Don't make decisions that will affect the rest of your life based on emotionalism and sensationalism. If the decision to go to Bible college happened during a meeting, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
If a decision to go to Bible college is tied in your brain to a certain worship song or worship service or sermon or talk at your youth group, it's probably not a good idea for you to go, because your emotions were being manipulated at the time, and it was being done purposely to get you to think along these lines.
Yeah.
Okay? I don't want to speak ill of your youth pastor, because, as I've said many times before, the local youth pastor is not the problem. It was whoever got their great-grandfather into this religion. That was the problem. Generations back, the problem started. So, as I've said many times, this has been my mantra on every episode so far. Don't point fingers at individuals, but certainly, absolutely assess rationally what they are telling you. Because even though they're just parroting things that they've been taught, that they've been told to believe, it's still toxic to you. And that kind of bad advice can ruin your life. So be mindful of the context of when that decision was made. Because if it was tied in any way, shape, or form to something that was designed to poke at your emotions, chances are it's a bad decision. Step back, do your research. Research the school that you want to go to, or the schools that you are thinking about applying to, and really get a feel for what your life is going to look like for 4 years if you go there, and what it can do to you psychologically and emotionally, and what it can do to your attitudes about certain things, particularly if you are a male. Bible college is a horrible place to learn about women. Bible college is a terrible place to find examples of how to treat women. You want to have a happy relationship, marriage, whatever that's going to look like in your life, then don't take your cues about how to treat women from anything you see on a Bible college campus. Pure and simple, because you will not get good examples at all. If you are a female and thinking about going to Bible college, understand that the environment can be absolutely predatory against you.
Oh, God, yeah.
Okay? It can be absolutely predatory in terms of how they go about controlling you and about how the men on that campus will ultimately treat you. Because with such a heavy emphasis on being married to get a youth pastor position, chances are you will be offered a proposal by some guy whose motives are really only twofold: advance my career and get laid.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it has nothing to do with love. Most of the time, it has nothing to do with long-term commitment. It has to do with the fact that they need some kind of an angle, some kind of bullet on their resume that's going to put them a little bit further up in the pile. And they're also randy as fuck because they've gone through their entire adolescence being told that even just rubbing one out is wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you look upon a woman with lust, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. Oh, bullshit. I mean, did these people, when they wrote this book, did they know? Well, actually, I know the answer to this. No, they didn't really know where babies came from. But they also had to know a few things about human nature if that was in there in the first place. Okay? Know the school that you are applying to. Know what their rules are. Ask yourself if you can really live with this and if you should. My advice, go to a school that is going to treat you like an adult from day one and will continue to do so until you prove that you can't handle the responsibility, because there are rules on every college campus. But if you walk into your college experience from the standpoint of it being an experience, something that's going to be good for you, something that's going to be worthwhile for you long term, don't go to Bible college. It's a bad idea. It's a very, very bad idea. And in our next episode, I'm going to get into some very specific reasons why, because I came up with some great stuff researching this, but I now have an hour and a half of raw raw audio that I have to now edit and mix down by Saturday night, and it is now Thursday. Okay? So I'm going to end it off here, and we're going to pick this up next time with a little bit more specific information about what some schools expect and the things that you should be very, very weary of. But for now, I just want to leave you with this. It's your life. And the people who approach you and start talking to you about what God wants for you, you know what? They're well-meaning people, but ignore them. Please, just ignore them and ask yourself if it makes any sense whatsoever that this God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, should ever need to use someone else as a mouthpiece to tell you what he wants. Because as soon as you start thinking about that in that way, I think two things will happen. Number one, you'll stop worrying about what other people want and be more concerned with what you want. And number two, you'll start recognizing just how little influence or how much apathy your so-called God has toward this decision. Because if he's not talking to you, then why are you making decisions based on his will? Never let someone else's words about your future govern how you manage creating a good future. Okay? Because the moment you reach that point where it's your decision and no one else's, you'll be in a better spot to make a better decision about your future. And if there's one issue that is really, really important to me, it's this one, because I am living the consequences. And you don't have to. You have an opportunity right here, right now, to make the decision that you are not going to squander your intellect in one of these places, that you're going to do something better for society. And even if you never step away from theism, even if belief is always going to be something that is part of your life, understand this. You can do more good as a layperson than you will ever do in organized ministry. How do I know this? Because the vast majority of the work that I did in the ministry was not part of a specific church. It was programs for youth. It was programs for prison inmates. There were all kinds of things that I was involved in as a layperson that I believe allowed me to do more and to be more involved and to have more freedom in what I was doing than I would ever have had as a pastor. So there's no reason for you to squander your intellect. There's no reason for you to squander all the money that you have saved going to a Bible college when you can go and get a real degree, have a snowball's chance in hell of getting a real job, and still have opportunities to do what you want to do in ministry, if that is even something that you still want to do after 4 years of secular college. Because let me tell you, go to a real school, get a taste of real life, and that, I believe, will be the first step toward you actually getting and staying unbound. And I say that because, especially if you grew up in an environment where you went to a Christian school or you were always in an evangelical home, what you see when you step onto a real campus as opposed to a Bible school campus will be a real eye-opener. I wish that I had visited at least one or two secular colleges along with VFCC. I really wish that I had, because I really think that the contrast of cultures would have been enough for me to make the decision to not go to Bible college. Know what your options are. Do not listen to what other people are saying. Follow your own counsel on what your future should look like, because it is just that. It is your future. It is no one else's business. And it is certainly no one else's business to walk up to you and tell you that God wants you to do anything. I'll have more on that next week. And if we're talking about college careers, then I'm certain that I'm talking to a lot of young people. You have an opportunity here. You have an opportunity to start taking control of the things in your life that matter. Your autonomy, your intellect, these things matter. And you need to seize control of these things before they are taken away from you. And the easiest place to lose them is on a Bible college campus. But start making strides right now to educate yourself about what your options are. Really get to understand the consequences of going to one of these places and being thrust into a position where you are destined to lose nearly $200,000 in income because God somehow wanted you to do this. It's time to stop worrying about what God wants and start worrying about what you want, because you are the one that has to live in your own skin. You are the one that has to deal with the consequences. God is not going to be there to help you when you can't get a job. He's not going to be there when you can't pay your bills. He's not going to be there when you can't meet your responsibilities because at 48 years old, you don't have enough of a career to be able to afford even the most basic of lifestyles. It's a bad place to be. Don't put yourself in that position. Start right now thinking for yourself and getting your mind unbound. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Unbound. Show topics are chosen for their timeliness, relevance, and social impact. If you have ideas for future show topics, please email us at unbound.podcast.network@gmail.com and follow us on social media. And also, once again, please consider supporting us on Patreon. You'll be making a huge difference. Thanks for listening once again. We'll be back next week with a whole new episode when we'll come together again and help each other get and stay unbound.